Rain tapped against the windows, steady and cold, while the human sat alone in his small living room. The night had been silent until now, but then a sound reached his ears. Soft, strange, almost like the hiss of running water. He frowned. He never left the taps open. Slowly, he stood up, his boots pressing against the wooden floor with quiet thuds. The sound was coming from the bathroom. His heart began to beat faster. Someone was inside his house. He reached for the heavy wrench lying near the table, his fingers gripping it tight. The man was not rich, not important, but in this colony, thieves came for anything. Food, water, medicine, all were worth killing for. He moved carefully, step by step, trying not to make a single noise. The hiss of water grew louder. It was the shower, but he had not turned it on. The door to the bathroom was half open, steam curling out like ghostly smoke. He paused, breathing slow, his muscles tense. With his free hand, he pushed the door wider. Inside, the sight froze him. An alien girl stood under the shower, her head bowed, water running down her pale skin. Her hair, wet and tangled, clung to her face. Torn clothing lay in a heap near her feet, soaked and dirty. She wasn't armed. She wasn't dangerous. She looked broken, her eyes lifted, wide and glowing faintly in the dim light. Fear lived inside them, deep and sharp. She pressed her back to the wall, as if she expected him to strike. Droplets of water ran down her trembling body as she whispered a single word. Please. The wrench felt heavy in his hand, but he did not move closer. He kept staring, caught between anger and confusion. A stranger had entered his home, an alien no less. This was dangerous, very dangerous. Patrols punished humans who sheltered outsiders. They said aliens were untrustworthy, liars, even spies. If anyone discovered her here, his life could be ruined. Yet she did not threaten him. She only hugged her arms tight around her chest and shook, shivering under the warm spray. He saw her lips trembling, her skin marked with faint scars that looked old and cruel. He wanted to ask questions, but his voice refused to leave his throat. The alien girl spoke again, softer this time. I needed water. I needed clean. Her words were broken, as if human language was not natural for her. She looked at him not with pride, but with desperation. He tightened his grip on the wrench. You broke into my home, he said finally, his voice low. Her chin dropped, shame flickering across her face. I had no choice, she whispered. They were chasing me. I could not be seen outside. I thought, just one shower. Please, don't send me back. The man's chest tightened. He wanted to order her out, to take his life back to silence. But as he looked at her thin figure, her bones sharp under her skin, he saw more than a stranger. He saw someone close to breaking, someone who had been running too long. A sudden flash of light crossed the window, cutting through the steam. His head snapped toward it. Searchlights. Patrol drones were sweeping the street outside. He cursed under his breath. If they scanned his home and found her here, there would be no excuse. The alien girl pressed herself tighter to the wall. She had seen the light too. Fear flooded her eyes. If they find me, she whispered, they will kill me. And you. Her words struck him like a blade. His hands trembled on the wrench. This was not just about her anymore. If he chose to let her stay, he was risking his own neck. If he pushed her out, she would likely die within minutes. The sound of the patrol engines hummed closer, rattling the glass panes. He closed the bathroom door halfway, standing guard as if to block the view. He didn't know why he did it. His mind screamed at him to throw her out, but his body betrayed him. He stayed, silent, as the shadows of drones slid across the walls. Inside, the alien girl pressed her hand against her mouth, stifling her breath. Her wide eyes never left him. She waited for him to decide her fate. The engines passed slowly, their light fading as the patrol moved down the street. The man let out a long breath he didn't know he was holding. His grip on the wrench loosened, though he didn't drop it. When he finally turned back to her, she was still trembling, her wet hair sticking to her face, her lips parted as though she might beg again. But she said nothing this time. The silence between them felt heavy, as if the small bathroom had turned into a prison cell. The man's hand still rested on the wrench, but his grip had softened. The alien girl stood against the wall, shivering, her thin arms wrapped around herself. Drops of water slid down her skin, mixing with dirt that slowly washed away. She looked fragile, more like a survivor than a threat. He cleared his throat. Why here? Out of all the houses, why mine? His voice was low, but sharp enough to cut through the steam. Her glowing eyes flickered with fear. "I smelled water," she whispered. "I thought it was empty. I just wanted to wash. Only wash." Her words struck him oddly. No demand for food, no request for money, just water. She had risked everything for something as simple as a shower. The man lowered his wrench a little, though he kept it close. "You broke into my home. That is not a small thing." She shook her head quickly. "I am not thief. I did not take. I only wanted." Her voice cracked, and she pressed a hand to her chest. "I only wanted to feel clean again. Please believe me." He studied her more closely now. Her clothes lay in a heap, so torn and filthy they were barely rags. Her skin showed faint bruises, some fresh, others old. Around her wrists were marks, red and raw, as if chains had rubbed her for days. His chest tightened. Whoever she had been running from had not treated her like a person. The man exhaled slowly. "You said they would kill you. Who are they?" Her gaze dropped to the wet floor. For a long moment, she did not answer. Then her lips moved, barely a whisper. "My own kind." That answer made him pause. Aliens against aliens. It was rare, but not unheard of. Still, why would her people hunt her down for simply wanting to wash? He stepped closer, cautious, watching her flinch at his movement. "What did you do?" She lifted her face, and for a heartbeat, anger replaced her fear. "I helped a human once. That was my crime." His stomach twisted. In this colony, trust between species was thin as glass. To imagine her punished for a simple act of kindness filled him with quiet rage. He opened his mouth to say something, but the sound of engines outside cut him off. Searchlights flashed again through the window. The girl pressed herself lower to the ground, panic flooding her eyes. "They are still looking," she whispered. "They will not stop." The man's heart pounded hard against his ribs. He knew the patrols. If they found her here, there would be no questions, no mercy. They would execute her and punish him for harboring her. The safe choice was clear. Push her out now, pretend he saw nothing, and close the door. But when he looked at her trembling form, he saw something else. Not just a fugitive, not just a desperate stranger. He saw someone clinging to the last edge of hope. The man sighed, running a hand down his face. "You cannot stay here," he said, though his voice was softer than before. Her head snapped up. Tears pooled in her glowing eyes. "Please, just tonight. Only tonight. Tomorrow I go, I swear." Her words tumbled out quickly, desperate, as if each one might be her last chance. "If I step outside, they take me. You know they take me." He felt her words strike deep, like cold blades in his chest. He turned away, walking a few steps, his boots heavy on the wet floor. His mind raced. Logic told him to throw her out. Survival screamed at him to protect himself. Yet something human, something stubborn inside him, refused to watch her walk into death. Finally, he set the wrench down on the sink with a dull clang. The alien girl's breath caught, her eyes fixed on the sound. He turned back to her. "Dry yourself," he said roughly. "I'll find you something to wear." Her lips parted, disbelief shining through the tears. She nodded quickly, clutching the wall for balance. He left the bathroom, his own chest tight with unease. In his small bedroom, he dug through an old chest, pulling out a simple shirt and trousers. They would hang loose on her frame, but they were better than rags. When he returned, she had turned off the shower and stood dripping, arms hugging her body. He tossed the clothes toward her without meeting her eyes. "Put these on." She took them carefully, her hands shaking. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling but sincere. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned against the doorway, listening to the rain hammer harder against the windows. Outside, searchlights continued to cut across the streets, and the growl of patrol engines echoed through the night. He knew keeping her was dangerous, maybe suicidal. But something had already changed the moment he saw her scars. When she stepped out of the bathroom, her wet hair falling over her shoulders, the oversized shirt hanging loosely around her, she looked less like a stranger and more like someone broken who had been forced to fight too long. She held her torn rags in her hands as if ashamed of them. "I will not cause trouble," she said softly. "Tomorrow, I go." The man sat in his chair, the wrench now resting on the table beside him. The room was dim, only the faint yellow light from the old lamp pushing back the shadows. Across from him, the alien girl sat quietly, wrapped in the oversized shirt he had given her. Her damp hair dripped onto the wooden floor. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, as if afraid that even moving might make him change his mind. His eyes studied her carefully. She looked young. Not a child, but not old either. Her glowing eyes seemed too large for her thin face. Every time thunder rolled outside, she flinched, as though expecting soldiers to burst in at any second. He wanted to ask questions, but he also wanted silence. Still, curiosity pushed harder than caution. "Those scars," he said finally, his voice rough. "Chains?" Her lips parted, but she didn't look at him. "Yes." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Why were you chained?" For a moment, she didn't answer. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then slowly she whispered, "Because I said no." His brow furrowed. "No?" She lifted her face, and her glowing eyes carried both shame and anger. "They wanted me to work, to obey. I refused. I helped someone escape, a human." The man froze, his jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists on his knees. She had risked everything for one of his own kind. That was her crime. That was why she carried scars. "Who was it?" he asked. Her voice dropped even lower. "A soldier. He was broken, bleeding. They wanted to use him for the mines. I opened his chains. I thought he would die anyway, but he survived. They knew I helped. They beat me. They chained me. They called me traitor." The man's stomach turned. He pictured it too easily. Aliens dragging human prisoners, beaten into the dirt, worked until they collapsed. He had heard rumors but never seen it with his own eyes. Now the truth sat across from him, trembling in his shirt. "Why come here?" he asked. "Why risk my house? You knew patrols sweep this street." Her shoulders sank. "Because I have nowhere else. My own kind hunt me. Humans fear me. I am ghost to both. But—" She hesitated, her voice breaking. "But when I smelled water, I thought maybe just once I could feel alive again. Just once. Then I leave." The man rubbed his face with his palms. Her words stung because he saw no lie in her eyes. She didn't come to steal. She came to feel human, if only for a few minutes. Outside, a sharp sound cut through the rain, the metallic whine of a drone scanning the street. The man froze. His eyes shot to the window. A beam of pale light swept across his wall, then moved slowly toward the door. The alien girl's eyes widened. She pressed her back into the chair, gripping the fabric of the shirt with white knuckles. "They are here," she whispered. The man's heart hammered. If they scanned his house and found her heat signature, it was over. He stood quickly, moving to the window, and tugged the curtains closed. The drone's hum grew louder, the searchlight painting brighter shapes on the outside wall. "Stay quiet," he hissed, turning to her. She nodded, pressing her hands over her mouth. Her glowing eyes brimmed with terror. Seconds stretched like hours. The hum grew, filled the street, then paused outside his home. The man's breath caught. Sweat beaded his forehead. He imagined soldiers breaking down the door, dragging them both into the mud. Then, as quickly as it came, the sound faded. The drone moved on, its beam sliding away into the storm. The man let out the breath he had been holding, his chest rising and falling heavily. He looked back at her. She had tears in her eyes, but she was silent, staring at him as though waiting for judgment. He walked back to the table and sat down. His voice was tired, low. "You understand what this means. If they find you here, I'm finished too." She nodded quickly, wiping at her face with trembling hands. "I know. That is why tomorrow I go. Please, only this night." He leaned forward, studying her again. "If I let you stay, they'll come back, and they won't stop searching until they find you. You're not telling me everything." Her lips pressed together. He had caught her. She lowered her head, strands of wet hair falling over her face. Finally, she whispered, "They don't just want me dead. They want me as an example. They will display me. They will show the others what happens when you choose humans over your own." The man felt his jaw clench. This wasn't just one girl's fight. This was a message, a warning to crush kindness, to crush mercy. He realized if he threw her out tonight, it wouldn't just kill her. It would prove them right. The storm raged harder outside, rattling the glass while the house felt smaller with each breath. The man leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment before opening them again to her trembling form. "You're not safe anywhere," he muttered. "And if you stay here, neither am I." Her eyes glistened as she lifted her face. "Then what will you do?" The question struck him cold. He didn't have the answer. He only knew one thing. His life had changed the moment she stepped under his roof. The rain kept falling, the night pressing heavy, while two strangers sat across from each other, bound by a secret that could kill. The night stretched on, but the man could not rest. He sat near the door, wrench close to his hand, his ears sharp to every sound outside. The alien girl lay curled up on a blanket he had thrown on the floor. She had fallen asleep quickly, her thin body giving in to exhaustion, but even in sleep she twitched, as if chased by nightmares. The storm outside was fading. The rain slowed, and silence crept back into the street. Silence was not safety. Silence meant the patrols would move more carefully now. His eyes flicked to the window when a faint metallic thud echoed in the distance. He knew the sound, boots, heavy and sure, pressing down on wet ground. Soldiers, his breath caught when the knocking came, loud, firm, unkind. It rattled the thin wood of his door. "Open!" a voice barked, metallic, sharp, full of command. "House inspection, now." The alien girl woke instantly, her glowing eyes wide with terror. She sat up, clutching the blanket around her, her lips pressed together so tightly no sound escaped. Her fear filled the room like a second storm. The man's jaw tightened. He rose slowly, gesturing for her to stay down. She nodded, sliding silently toward the bathroom, hiding herself behind the door. Her bare feet barely touched the floor as she pressed into the shadows. The knocking grew louder. "Open, or we break it!" The man gripped the handle, forcing calm into his breath, and pulled the door open. 2 patrol soldiers stood there, armored, their visors glowing faint red. Behind them hovered a drone, its eye blinking with cold blue light. "Inspection," one soldier said flatly, pushing forward without waiting for permission. The other followed, the drone sliding inside with them. The man stepped back, fists tight at his sides, trying to look irritated instead of terrified. "You live alone?" the first soldier asked. "Yes," the man replied, his voice steady. The soldier's visor turned toward the floor, then the kitchen, then the bathroom door. His hand hovered over the scanner on his wrist. The man's heart slammed inside his chest. The alien girl pressed herself against the wall, her body shaking, breath trapped in her throat. She watched the faint glow under the door, knowing if the soldier scanned the room, it would all be over. The soldier lifted his wrist. The man stepped forward quickly. "What's the matter? My place is clean. No contraband, no fugitives, only rainwater and silence." His words came sharp but casual, trying to sound like every tired worker in the colony. The soldier paused. His visor turned slowly back toward the man. For a long moment, no one spoke. The drone buzzed softly, its camera blinking as it scanned the table, the chairs, the wrench. Then the second soldier grunted. "This block looks clear. The fugitive must have moved on." The first soldier hesitated but lowered his arm. "If you see anything, report immediately." "Of course," the man said, nodding quickly. The patrol moved back toward the door. The drone hovered for another second, its blue light flickering across the man's face before finally gliding out after them. The door shut. Heavy boots faded into the night. The man let out a breath so sharp it hurt his chest. His knees felt weak, but he held himself upright. His eyes turned toward the bathroom. Slowly, the door creaked open. The alien girl stepped out, her body trembling so violently she almost fell. Tears ran down her cheeks, mixing with the dirt still clinging to her skin. She clutched the blanket as if it were her only shield. "They nearly found me," she whispered, her voice breaking. He crossed the room, pressing a hand against her shoulder. "But they didn't." Her glowing eyes lifted to his face. "Why did you protect me? If they had searched, if they had scanned, I would have doomed you too." He shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I couldn't hand you over." She stared at him, stunned. Then her lips moved, trembling. No one has ever chosen me over safety." Before he could answer, another sound rolled across the street, an announcement from a patrol speaker. The cold voice echoed through the night. "The fugitive is still at large. Any citizen found hiding her will be executed without trial. Reward for information? 2 months' rations." The man's chest tightened. 2 months of rations was more than most families earned in a year. Neighbors would be listening. Greed was as dangerous as loyalty. He looked at her again. Her glowing eyes held a new fear, not of patrols, but of betrayal. "Someone will tell them," she whispered. "Someone always does." He clenched his jaw. She was right. Already, whispers would spread. Every knock on the door now could mean a neighbor eager for extra food. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "By morning, they'll be back, stronger, smarter. If you stay, they'll find you." Her face fell. "Then where do I go?" He didn't answer right away. His mind raced through streets, warehouses, old tunnels long abandoned. There were places patrols rarely touched, but none safe for long. Finally, he said, "You'll have to move with me. Tonight, before dawn." Her lips parted, stunned. "You would leave your home? For me?" He looked away, tightening his fists. "If I don't, we both die here. And I'm not ready to die tonight." The alien girl stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Then she nodded slowly, her trembling easing, though her eyes still glistened with fear. The storm had ended outside, leaving the air. The man packed in silence, stuffing a few pieces of bread, dried meat, and a flask of water into a worn bag. His hands moved fast, but his mind was louder than the storm that had passed. Every corner of the house felt heavy now, as if walls themselves had learned the secret and were waiting to betray him. The alien girl stood by the doorway, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. She clutched the oversized shirt he had given her, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. She wanted to ask where they were going, but fear kept her quiet. She looked like someone who had asked too many questions in life and been punished for each one. Finally, he glanced at her. "You can't go out like that," he said. He pulled an old coat from a hook near the door and handed it to her. "Keep your head down. Don't speak unless I tell you. Understand?" She nodded quickly, slipping into the coat. It swallowed her frame, the sleeves hanging past her hands. She looked almost like a shadow, thin and hidden. "I understand," she whispered. He tightened the strap of his bag across his shoulder, then unlocked the back door. The street beyond was dark, but he could hear faint voices from further down, patrols still sweeping through. He gestured for her to follow, and together they slipped into the cold night. The colony was quiet now, the rain leaving the roads wet and shining under the pale street lamps. Their boots splashed softly in puddles as they moved, careful to stay in the shadows. The man knew these alleys well, but each corner still felt dangerous. The girl walked close behind him, her steps light, her breath shallow. They turned into a narrow passage, walls close on both sides. Halfway through, the man froze. Voices carried from the end of the alley. Two soldiers stood near a patrol drone, scanning doorways with their glowing visors. The girl gasped softly, clutching his coat. He raised a hand, signaling silence. His eyes darted around until he spotted an old storage door to their right. He pushed it open with effort, the hinges creaking softly, and pulled her inside. Dust filled the air, thick and heavy, but it was cover. They crouched in the darkness, his hand pressing against the door to keep it shut. Outside, the soldier's boots splashed closer. The girl pressed against his shoulder, trembling so hard he could feel it. He reached out, steadying her with a hand on her arm. Her skin was ice cold, her breath quick against his sleeve. The soldiers paused just outside. One spoke in a rough voice. "The scanner picked up something here." The girl's eyes widened. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying not to breathe. The man's jaw clenched, his muscles tight as steel. If they opened the door, there would be no escape. But after a long pause, the second soldier grunted. "False reading. Too much rain in the air. Let's move." Their footsteps faded, slow at first, then gone. The man exhaled softly and lowered his head. For a moment, the only sound was the girl's muffled sob. She pressed her face into his sleeve, tears soaking the fabric. "I can't do this," she whispered shakily. "I'll get you killed." He pulled his arm free, but his voice was firm. "Quiet. You can cry later. Right now, you survive." She swallowed her sobs, nodding quickly, wiping her face with trembling hands. He pushed the door open again and peeked outside. The alley was empty. They slipped out, moving quickly. He led her through the maze of streets until they reached the edge of the colony. Ahead stood the fence, high, sharp, wired with rusted metal. Beyond it lay the old tunnels, long abandoned by workers, now nothing but dark caves. Patrols rarely went there, fearing collapses and gas leaks. It was dangerous, but it was also their only chance. The girl stared at the fence with wide eyes. How? How do we cross?" The man pulled a small tool from his bag, a cutter made from scavenged parts. He crouched near the fence, sparks flashing as he worked. The girl knelt beside him, her glowing eyes darting nervously to the streets behind them. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. He didn't look at her. "Because I can't stand the thought of them dragging you back." Her breath caught, her lips parting as if she wanted to say more. But before she could, the cutter burned through the last wire, and the metal gave way with a sharp snap. "Go," he whispered. She slipped through first, her thin body squeezing past the gap. He followed, pulling the wire back into place behind them. They crouched low, running into the shadows of the abandoned tunnels. The air inside was damp, filled with the smell of rust and stone. Dripping water echoed from the ceiling, each drop sounding too loud. The girl hugged her coat tighter, shivering as the darkness closed around them. "Will we be safe here?" she asked. The man shook his head. "Safe? No. Safer? Maybe." They stopped near a broken beam where the tunnel widened into a hollow. He lowered his bag, pulling out the bread and water. He handed her a piece without a word. She took it with both hands, staring at him as though it were treasure. She ate quickly, crumbs falling to the ground, then drank from the flask. When she finished, her eyes softened with something new, gratitude. "No one has ever done this for me," she said quietly. "Not even my own people." The man leaned against the cold wall, exhaustion pressing heavy on his shoulders. "Get used to it, because as long as you're with me, I'll keep you alive." Her glowing eyes shimmered in the dark. She studied him, almost unable to believe his words. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Then maybe I'm not alone anymore." The man said nothing, but his jaw tightened as he stared into the endless shadows of the tunnel. He knew they had bought only a little time. The patrols would search harder, and when they found the trail, the real fight would begin. The tunnels were silent except for the steady drip of water from above. The man sat against a broken stone pillar, his back aching from the hard ground. The alien girl lay curled near the wall, the oversized coat wrapped tightly around her thin body. She had fallen asleep, but her breathing was uneven, shallow, and full of fear. Even in rest, she looked hunted. He kept watch, his ears tuned to the faint echoes that carried through the dark passages. Any noise, boots, drones, voices, would mean the patrols had found their trail. His hand rested on the wrench beside him, the same tool he had carried from the start. It wasn't much against armored soldiers, but it was something. Hours passed, heavy and slow. At last, the girl stirred, her glowing eyes opening weakly. She pushed herself up and looked around, confusion flashing across her face until she remembered where she was. "They won't stop, will they?" she whispered. The man shook his head. "Not until they have you." Her shoulders sank. She hugged her knees, resting her chin on them. "I don't want you to die for me. I should go. I should leave you before they find us." He turned to her sharply. "If you go out there alone, you won't last an hour. You know that." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." He didn't answer at first. He stared at the dripping water, his jaw tight. Finally, he said, "Because I've seen enough people abandoned. I won't do it again." Her eyes lingered on him, wide and shining in the dark. She wanted to believe him, but trust was not easy for her. Before either could say more, a sharp sound cut through the tunnel, the metallic click of boots on stone. The man stiffened. The girl's breath hitched as she grabbed his sleeve. Voices followed, echoing down the passage. "They went this way," one soldier said. The man cursed under his breath and pulled her to her feet. They moved quickly, their steps soft, trying to stay ahead. The tunnel twisted, splitting into two paths. Without hesitation, he chose the left, dragging her with him. The voices grew louder. Lights flashed behind them, cutting into the darkness. The girl stumbled, fear slowing her steps. He pulled harder, his grip firm. "Faster," he hissed. They reached a collapsed section where rubble blocked half the tunnel. He squeezed through first, then pulled her after him. Stones scraped against their arms, cutting skin, but they didn't stop. On the other side, they crouched low, gasping for breath. The soldiers' lights appeared on the rubble, their voices sharp. "They're close. Don't let them escape." The man's heart pounded. He looked around quickly, spotting a broken ladder leading up into a service shaft. "Climb," he ordered. The girl's eyes widened. I can't." "You can, or we both die here." "What?" he snapped. Her hands shook as she grabbed the ladder. Slowly, painfully, she began to climb. The man stayed below her, gripping the bottom rung, ready to push her higher if needed. Stones crumbled under their weight, but the ladder held. The soldiers clambered over the rubble. Their lights swung closer. One shouted, "There! Up there!" Bolts of energy fired, searing through the tunnel. Sparks showered around them as the ladder shook. The girl cried out, nearly slipping, but the man pushed her upward with all his strength. "Keep going!" he shouted. She climbed faster, tears streaking down her face. Finally, she reached the top, crawling into the shaft. The man followed quickly, pulling himself up just as another bolt blasted the wall where his head had been. He rolled into the narrow passage, gasping. The girl clutched his arm, her body trembling. They crawled through the shaft until it opened into a forgotten storage chamber. Broken crates lay scattered, and old machines sat rusting in the corners. Dust filled the air, thick and choking. The girl collapsed to the floor, sobbing. "I nearly fell. I nearly got you killed." He crouched beside her, his breath still hard. "But you didn't. We're alive." Her glowing eyes met his, wet with tears. "I don't understand you. Any other human would have pushed me away. Why not you?" His gaze softened, though his voice stayed firm. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted, to be treated like you're nothing. No one deserves that. Not even you." For a long moment, she stared at him in silence. Then slowly she leaned against his shoulder. Her small frame shook with quiet sobs, but she didn't pull away. He let her rest there, his jaw tight, his hand gripping the wrench beside him. The patrol's voices echoed faintly in the tunnels below. They were not safe yet. But in that dark chamber, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in his promise, that he would not abandon her. The man closed his eyes for a moment, exhaustion pressing on him, but his grip never loosened on the wrench. He knew the chase would not end here. If anything, it had only grown more dangerous. Still, as the alien girl leaned against him, whispering, "Thank you," he felt something stir inside him that he had not felt in years. A reason to fight. And with that reason, he knew he would not stop until she was free. The storage chamber was dark and cold, but it was the only place that gave them a few breaths of peace. The man leaned against the wall, his body heavy with exhaustion. His hands were scraped, his arms burned from climbing, but his mind stayed sharp. The alien girl sat near him, hugging her knees, her glowing eyes fixed on the broken crates around them. She looked calmer now, though fear still lingered in her trembling hands. For a short time, neither spoke. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of distant patrol drones echoing through the tunnels below. The man kept his wrench close, every muscle ready to move again. He knew this peace would not last. At last, the girl whispered, "They won't stop, will they?" "No," he answered. "They'll hunt until they find us. That's what they do." Her eyes glistened in the faint light. "Then you should leave me. I will only bring death to you." He shook his head firmly. "I already made my choice. You're not alone anymore." Her lips parted, and for a moment she just stared at him, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her before. Then, before she could reply, a sharp crack split the silence, the sound of metal being forced open. The man's head snapped toward the door at the far end of the chamber. The girl gasped softly. "They found us." He stood quickly, pulling her to her feet. "Stay behind me." The door burst open. Soldiers stormed in, their visors glowing red, rifles raised. The drone floated above them, its cold blue eyes scanning the room. The man tightened his grip on the wrench. Against armored troops, it was a laughable weapon, but he had no other choice. One soldier barked, "Step away from the fugitive human. Report her, and you will be spared." The girl's hand clutched his sleeve, her eyes wide with despair. She whispered, "Don't fight, they'll kill you." But the man stepped forward, placing himself between her and the soldiers. His voice came out steady, sharper than steel. "If you want her, you'll have to take us both." The soldiers raised their rifles. The drone beeped, targeting them. The girl's breath hitched, tears spilling down her cheeks. She was sure this was the end. But the man wasn't ready to die. His eyes darted to the old machines in the corners, rusted, broken, but still wired with faint sparks of energy. He remembered working in these tunnels long ago, fixing engines and rewiring circuits. And he remembered something else, How unstable these old power lines were. "Get down!" he shouted. He hurled the wrench across the chamber. It struck a rusted panel, sending sparks flying. The wires inside caught, and a sudden burst of light exploded across the wall. The power surged, leaping like lightning to the machines nearby. The chamber roared with energy. A blinding flash filled the air as the old systems overloaded. The soldiers staggered back, their visors flickering. The drone sparked, its blue eye shattering with a hiss. The girl dropped to the ground, covering her head. The man threw himself over her, shielding her from flying debris. Heat and light ripped through the chamber, and for a moment it felt like the whole world was ending. Then, silence. Smoke curled from the broken machines. The soldiers groaned. Their armor scorched, their rifles dead. The drone lay shattered on the ground, its circuit smoking. The man pulled himself up, his chest heaving. His ears rang, but he was alive. He reached down and helped the girl to her feet. Her glowing eyes stared at him in awe, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. You saved us," she whispered. He shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. "No, we got lucky. They'll send more." Her grip tightened on his arm. "Then we run together." He looked at her for a long moment. She was fragile, broken, hunted, but in her voice, he heard something new. Strength. They slipped past the stunned soldiers and into the tunnels again. The air was thick with smoke, but ahead, faint light glowed, dawn creeping in from the far end. They ran toward it, their steps echoing against the stone. When they finally reached the exit, the first rays of sunlight touched their faces. The colony behind them was waking, but they were already leaving it behind. The girl stopped, looking back at the place that had nearly destroyed her. Then she turned to the man, her voice trembling but steady. "Why?" she asked again. "Why risk everything for me?" He studied her face, the scars on her skin, the fear still in her eyes, and the small flame of hope beginning to burn there. His answer was simple, but it carried the weight of truth. Because no one deserves to live in chains. Not human, not alien. And because I'd rather die fighting for someone's freedom than live watching them suffer. Her glowing eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only tears of fear. They were something else. Belief. She whispered, "Then I will follow you."